Alright, so today is February 9th, and it's Sunday, and that's episode 4. We're going to talk about web accessibility. I'm Sergey, and we have Marwan.
Hey everyone, really excited, pretty important topic, web accessibility, so I'm looking forward to learn more.
This episode, you're going to kind of learn about how you can verify web accessibility of some features that you're building, or like some websites or web pages, and let's maybe like start talking about like different types of disabilities that people might have. So like, we know that someone might have an issue like kind of with hearing, or perhaps kind of like an issue with motor system, potentially like issues like cognitive issues. So people might be kind of temporarily disoriented, or people might be like visually impaired, and there might be different types of disabilities. The ones that are kind of acquired when people were born, and the ones that are temporary, or like some might be like also permanent, that are acquired during the accidents. And
Right.
another type of disability that is kind of a bit potentially like something that might be affecting you in your daily life is when you're trying to interact with websites or web pages, when you are like doing sports, or maybe like for carrying mothers, like for carrying their child like with one hand, and like trying to maybe look up some information on the like with the other hand, or like also kind of an edge case scenario, but still like very possible, is a person might be drunk, and like they're trying to get the Uber, or like get a ticket to a next airplane because they missed one. So like also a possibility.
Right.
Right, let's move on. So we're going to, like, on our agenda today, we're going to look at some kind of like laws that are kind of driving the accessibility in Ontario. So we're going to look at AODA, which is Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, and kind of like what are the key timelines there for websites to be compliant. We're going to look at some user surveys and look about how people are feeling about accessibility, like people with accessibility needs. How do they like generally feeling, like what is the trend, like year to year? Do they feel that it's improving or not? Some other things. We're going to look at one specific page, and kind of like try to analyze it, check the keyboard accessibility, test with screen readers, both mobile and desktop. We're going to check the Chrome built-in accessibility tools, extensions, compare results between like our manual tests and kind of those automatic tests. We'll look at some tools that can be added into the pipeline, into the build pipeline potentially, and look at some educational material, as well as why people should generally care about web accessibility. Let's start by looking at some deadlines. So AODA, which we already know what it is. It's kind of like a set of laws that says that by January 2021, so next year, all internet websites in Ontario and web content must conform with WCAG 2.0 level AA, excluding live captions and audio description. And kind of companies should file an accessibility report by December 31st of this year. So
they should file accessibility reports. What does that mean for the companies?
So like I believe that like probably a legal department, or like whoever is doing like dealing with legal stuff, like probably should file a report that states like what are the measures that company is taken in order to make sure that it is compliant with AODA, and specifically this directive.
Okay, so it's on the site or app maintainer to submit something to say that our website is compliant.
Correct, yes.
It's not the other way around,
That's
where the government is auditing.
Correct. That's my understanding.
Okay.
And
Right.
What kind of things are included in the CAC 2.0? So there is a website, WebAIM, that kind of like put a checklist for us that still trying to establish a connection. So the website went down and we had to use Web Archive in order to show it. But the reason why I wanted to show this WebAIM's VCAC 2 checklist is because they try to aim to kind of translate the official recommendation, official language, into kind of more developer-friendly language, so it's easier to understand for developers and like easier to kind of understand what is required from them to do. So it's they on their own say that like it's not kind of an official checklist, and if you want to check the specific language, then you have to consult with the official specification. However, like if you want to check out the kind of the rest of the details, then you can check them on this page, and it talks about things like text alternatives, like time-based media. So fortunately, based on what we saw here, that by January 2020 we should comply with everything except for live caption and audio, so that's why this section is a bit different. So like it doesn't apply too aggressively. Like it talks about audio and video, talks about the kind of relationships here and the rest of the stuff. And if you fail, like maybe like something that is important to mention about AOD, if you fail to comply with the accessibility requirements, then there is potential for monetary penalties. And this page over here talks about how much you can be charged. So I see that like a corporation that is guilty can be fined up to 100,000 per day. Like that's very significant money. So that's why everyone is now trying to take it very seriously. And who actually should comply? So that's something that you can find from this PDF. So private and non-profit organizations, like with 1 to 49 employees. So here it doesn't really talk about 2021 kind of deadline, so maybe that's an exception. But then rest, private and non-profit with 50 plus employees should comply. Same as for public sector of any size. Like all of those kind of organizations should comply with AOD. And
right, I just want to add also, Sergey, I was just doing some Googling. So while Sergey has mentioned this as a Ontario-specific compliance or legislation, there is a US one called Section 508, and I'm sure there's many other ones globally, but the requirements are more or less the same. So most of these laws are similar.
Yes.
So whatever Sergey is going to be covering today would be relevant to you, whether you're in Ontario or not.
Yes, good point.
Yeah.
Okay. So moving on, something that might be not obvious, like because that kind of text over here, it says that like all internet websites and web content must conform But what about web applications? So, sorry, not web applications. What about mobile applications? So there is a section in AODA that specifically asks this question. So, do mobile apps need to be made accessible and meet AODA requirements? And the answer is that if they are internet-based, then they would be required to comply. So if you have an application that is making any kind of internet connection, talks to some services, then you should be compliant. They are basically treated as web applications.
Okay, good point.
Right, and user surveys. So here is WebAIM has the projects section. Okay, so this projects page is talking about various surveys that WebAIM conducted, and they asked people with disabilities to fill information, maybe specifically for users with low vision, or web accessibility practitioners, people like you and me, and our viewers as well, and screen reader user surveys. So that's specifically to screen readers, with motor disabilities, etc., etc. And if we look at one of the surveys, we can see that in this survey they had 1224 submissions, valid responses. And if you think about it, it's probably the number is too low for in order to tell that it's accurate. However, the thing about the surveys is that you can't really track people with disabilities. Some might, you might offer an option on your website to tell, I would can you tell me if you have vision problem or hearing problem or motor problem, etc., etc., and then try to customize the experience based on that. However, people with disabilities don't generally like this idea because they are potentially being tracked this way, or they might not really tell you the truth out of fear of being discriminated. So what that means is maybe some content might be not showing for them, or some features might not be accessible for them,
Right.
Simply because someone will think, oh, well, we can't really build it for these people right now, so because of that we're going to hide it. Right. And that's why the only realistic way to gather the information is by conducting those user surveys. So we can see over here that there are some demographics information, age, do you have a disability, yes or no, what kind of disability types you have, some kind of ratio there, screen reader proficiency, internet proficiency. Potentially there might be more sections about diving into maybe multiple disabilities, but something that I found very interesting, the reason why it's very relevant and why the government, different governments are trying to push the laws for people to start building with accessibility in mind, is because people with disabilities are providing the feedback that they either see that things became less accessible in the past years, or there is no change at all, and we can see that only 40% people think that it became more accessible. Right, so let's dive into our demo. So maybe I should provide some context first. So this is the page that is a real page. I just changed the images and wording, but it's very real markup from a real online project that I had to perform the audit on, and there are some accessibility issues that I found which I wanted to share. So
Sure.
Like I said before, let's start with keyboard accessibility, but first, maybe before that, let's try to understand what that page is about. So it's kind of some kind of company that is selling bubble gums, and it has like a membership feature where you might have two different rewards programs. One is enhanced program that costs you some money, and the one is kind of like regular points program. And you can register an online account, or you can join the rewards program for free, or join that kind of enhanced bubblegum plus program. And if you
Bubblegum Plus. I
and,
like that rewards program.
And if you kind of like already have the regular rewards program, then you want to upgrade, then there is an option for that as well. So this is basically a functionality for new users, and this is for people who already have this card and would like to upgrade. And then there is an application, so you can install like either on App Store and Google. There is an FAQ section. Some like if people still have questions, then they can reach out to customer desk or help center, and then some legal notes here. And I kind of like removed header and footer because those are not the main focus of this. So if we were to do a keyboard testing, so probably the most important feature is like tabbing, like how efficiently you can tap through the links or buttons on the page. So I don't know, Marwan, if you notice, but like I'm kind of like shifting focus right now between buttons, and
I don't see anything. Yeah.
so that's the thing. Like there is a very slight outline that appears around the button, and when you jump to the next one, it's like not clear where it's going. So that's potentially an accessibility concern, something that can be improved. So either customize this outline or make it a bit more clear where it's jumping to. So something that I did like as an example is on the WebAIM website. So you have a feature where as you're moving from one element to another, then it kind of animates the focus. So here is the example of what I meant by this animated focus. So you can see the outline near the kind of the text input, and then as I'm pressing tab, then you can see a slight animation that kind of like helps to visually understand what's the next item that is focused. Also, you can see that what they are doing is like they are providing kind of highlighting the button when it's focused, so that like background color or like links, so that background color changes. So that's something that could potentially be used here as well. Like just changing the background color would already help you to understand when you're going from one element to another.
So, quick question.
Yeah.
If you make just an outline that's clear enough,
Yes,
is that good enough?
I think yes. Like if it works for everyone, you know, like for the designers and users as well, then it's definitely an option. And I think you can be smart about how you implement it. There are options to only activate that outline. Like for example, right now I'm clicking on the element. Like I think it's a possibility to only activate it when you are trying to do the navigation through keyboard, or like maybe only when you like specifically click on the icon. But I don't remember where I saw those examples, but it's definitely something that can be achieved with pure CSS.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
So tabbing order.
Yes, tab in
and
order.
Highlighting.
Tab in order is the other one. So I don't know if we run into this issue so far. Like it seems that kind of like the tab follows the order of the elements, but let's see if there will be a place where it breaks. And actually I'm not sure where the tab just went, so it basically disappeared. So here is another issue. It seems that there are some elements that are links or buttons that can be activated, but they are off screen, they are not visible, and as a result tab disappears. So we can see that it just appeared on the help center over here, but like if I go back and I need to press tab a couple of times back in order to kind of like understand where it is right now.
Yeah.
Okay. And one way how you can debug, like kind of like understand where your focus moved. So you can open Chrome DevTools. I'm going to move them to the bottom. And if you switch to a console section, there is kind of an option to add watchers, kind of live expressions. So you can add document active element, which would kind of show you the current element in focus. So you can see that currently it's a main section that is in focus, and I also use a couple more, like I like to display outer HTML of that thing that is in focus so that I can understand kind of the markup around it, as well as just specific text content. So let me try to go through that FAQ section again and see what happens. So right now we're on a join free button, jump to the checkbox, bubblegum plus terms and conditions, join plus, again checkbox, upgrade. So now we're on the download on the App Store image. Hope that's an image. Well, it's like an anchor here, and then there is a picture inside. I wonder if there is an alternative text, something that we'll find out soon. So after that, it seems that it jumps into on some link that is somewhere around there, but it's not visible. And it has that about bubblegum robots text. So it seems that like if we open one of those sections, that's where the focus is disappearing, because the elements are still kind of accessible to the page, but users don't really know what's happening.
Right.
Okay, and after that, so let's see, we go through this section finally. So there are a couple more links inside that text, and we can see that kind of links over here, they have very, like, they almost have no difference from the rest of the text. I mean, like, probably even though that's legal notes, in that case you still need to provide some visual aid to kind of help people understand like what are links. So like I would never figure out that this is a link over here. So I'm thinking like maybe an underscore or something like that would help in this situation, especially since it's being used in some other places on the site already.
Right. So to indicate links, either underline or somehow like use a blue color.
Yeah, like a very distinctive color. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Alright, so I think the next one, and I don't know, Marwan, if there is anything else that you would like to add for keyboard accessibility? Or
so that live expression, that's pretty powerful. I didn't know about that.
Mm-hmm.
It will automatically run the expression anytime the selection changes?
Correct. So since like it's kind of live expressions are constantly monitoring the value of the properties that you would like to monitor. So here we're using the DOM API to kind of get the current elements in focus, and that's very helpful to kind of like see what's like where your focus moves, like in case you're lost.
It's very cool.
Yep. Maybe I think there is one more issue on that page. So like if we try to, for example, like I know that I can open FAQ section with a mouse, but it doesn't seem that I can jump to any of the kind of buttons in order to expand and collapse those sections. So that's another concern here. Can do that with a mouse, but not with a keyboard. There's just no way for me to get to one of those buttons.
And in terms of the hierarchy of the page, are we gonna talk about that elsewhere?
Yes, we're going to go through it, but that's very, very good point. Okay, something else that I found like probably might be accessibility and usability issue. If you try to select a text, like if you want to copy some text inside the FAQ section, then like this is what happens. There is some click handler that is not set up properly, so it just collapses the section. You need to try harder in order to copy the text.
I see.
Okay, so let's move on. So for hierarchy, it's probably something that some extensions would be able to handle, like to check the order of the elements. We're going to test them out and see how well they behave.
Sounds good.
Right. So next one, we're going to look at the screen readers. And screen reader is a software that you install on your device in order to read out the text on the screen. And some examples are, for example, NVDA. It's a fairly popular screen reader for Windows. So there is a download link here, and if you're on Mac, then you would want to use a built-in feature called VoiceOver. On Android, there is a voice assistant that shouldn't be confused with Google Assistant, because that's like a separate accessibility feature. And if people want to learn how to activate it, then there is a link over here. And similar, there is a voice assistant on iOS devices that can be enabled. So that's very powerful. Like sometimes people just don't want to install the software on their desktops, like say like that NVDA, or like on Mac it's probably not an issue, but like on Windows potentially people like might only know about JAWS and they might use something else, like might not want to install like a kind of software that costs a lot of money. So as a quick way of testing, you can always try to do that testing on your phones. Like everyone has an Android or iOS phone, and since those have screen readers built in, those are very, very good at showing you where you have some problems. The only concern there would be that you're testing only mobile experience, not a desktop experience as part of it.
Okay, so the Android voice assistant, is it related to NVDA in any way? Or no?
No, just like it's also a screen reader just for the phone, but otherwise they're not the same products.
Okay. I've worked with a consultant before who specializes in accessibility. I guess like he had his own accessibility challenges, and he recommended NVDA as kind of like the golden screen reader at the time, because it's open source and it works well with Firefox and Chrome.
I see. Yeah, previously it was like I think JAWS was the standard de facto for screen readers. It was like it had better accessibility features, but even if we look at those surveys from the WebAIM, then you can see like kind of like in a trend, people are saying that they use NVDA more and more. So there is like definitely a decline of JAWS users and kind of like a raise of NVDA users.
Okay, cool. And my experience with screen readers, just for our viewers, sometimes there are issues related to the screen reader itself. So sometimes the screen readers are still catching up with the spec, or sometimes there are integration issues between the screen reader, the platform, and the browser. So that makes it a little bit more challenging. And it's on us as developers to spend the extra time and be more diligent to really find the golden combination.
Yes.
That's most compatible with the spec.
Yep, I agree. Like, I agree that like we have to test like what is the proper way of implementing a certain feature with accessibility in mind, and like you kind of like have to do your own research in order to know what different screen readers can support or cannot support. I think it's something that we'll mention a bit later in the presentation as well, like where we kind of look at some already established patterns that can be reused, and like those were battle tested already.
Sweet.
Okay, so let's try to test our page with the screen reader. So I'm going to launch NVD. Okay.
Welcome Brave, welcome document. Main landmark, welcome to the Bubblegum experience, heading level 1, signed up for Bubblegum Plus in store. Register your...
And it already started to read out the page that it found under the focus. So there are different tools that you can use with screen readers. So you can like use maybe like very quickly. Let me show you how you would navigate NVDA. Shortcuts. So here is a nice cheat sheet that you can use in order to familiarize with the with various shortcuts that NVD has on its own. And maybe in the description for this video I'm going to kind of add like a bit older version of the screen layout that like also has all of those shortcuts, but it looks like a keyboard with all of the hotkeys with descriptions what those hotkeys are doing. So just an alternative cheat sheet to it. But kind of like after you play a little bit with the NVDA and like with all of those shortcuts, then you kind of like get the idea of how to use it. So let me start it again.
Yeah.
Okay. And there is one more feature, so let me bring the taskbar.
Note of NVDA. Help. Config. Tools menu.
So
View,
there is
speech viewer.
There is a feature called speech viewer that can display what is currently reading. Some people might struggle with the kind of listening to the voice of the NVDA, like just because they're not too familiar with like synthetic voices. And speech viewer is something that should like help them.
NVDA
kind of
register your online account.
What it's reading right now.
Register account. Earn. Welcome Brave. Signed up for Bubblegum Plus in store.
So
register
example,
your online
right now,
account heading level 3.
Right now it's reading the heading level 3, and I'm trying to jump to the next, say like checkbox.
Clickable. I accept the Bubblegum Plus terms and conditions. I accept the Bubblegum Plus terms and conditions. Checkbox not checked.
Here, so like it just wrote all of that inside that speech viewer.
NV.
Okay.
Link. Heading NVDA speech.
Remove it. So let's see.
Welcome Brave. Already have Bubblegum. $5.
So I'm just going to reload
Say
the speech.
which program is right for you. Save earn. Clickable. I accept the Bubblegum. Address and welcome document. Link register account.
Right. So right now we are on that register account link over here, And we're going to jump to the next header by using up and down arrows. So just go down.
Heading level 2, which program is right for you?
So that's a heading. Then let's go next.
Graphic bubblegum rewards.
Okay, so we are on the first column right here.
Graphic bubblegum plus.
Okay, went to next graphic.
Save.
Okay, just set save. I'm not sure, like, if I would be visually impaired, I wouldn't really know what's the context for the save. So there is something that should be adjusted in the markup here.
Save an extra 10% on almost everything superscript 1.
And it actually skipped that kind of dash section, so like it didn't really announce any of that. And also, like, when it said save on extra, then I don't really know if it's related to rewards program or plum to the plus program.
Right.
Okay, so there are some issues here. Let's try to skip a couple of sections.
Earn 5 ship free ship pay.
So now we're on a pay section.
Heading level 3 $0.
And wow, like we found out that $0 was actually marked with heading level 3. Wonder why is that? Like, it's definitely not a heading per se. So probably in that case, like, just mark the heading markup was used to make the text larger, which is not the best way of using the markup. In this example, you'd have to use just CSS instead. Okay, small one.
Link join free.
Okay,
Heading level 3 $5 a year.
again, we have that heading here.
Clickable checkbox not checked. I accept the bubblegum plus terms and conditions.
All right, so that was
That's
pretty good. Like, it announced the full, it announced both that kind of the role of the element, the role being checkbox, and then it said kind of the name. So the name is like, I accept the bubblegum terms and conditions. It pronounced the state or current value, which is not checked, and then there is kind of a fourth attribute, which is state. So like, if checkbox would be disabled, then it would also announce that as well.
I accept the link bubblegum plus terms and conditions.
And we just focused on the link, so that's good.
Button join plus.
And the join plus is actually a button, and that's right, it doesn't take us to another page. It just kind of allows us to maybe do some validation here, like when you're trying to accept, and then after that it would take us to some other
Graphic
section.
Plum Plus and Plum Rewards membership cards.
So here we went to the graphic section, but maybe instead of that, first it should tell me that I'm kind of in that already have bubble gum rewards section. So like, maybe the order here is not the best. Maybe like, if you put the header above the image, then it would make a bit more sense for the user that like, now I'm in a new section.
Heading level 2 already have bubblegum rewards.
But instead, like, it's the opposite, it's flipped.
Heading level 2
Yeah.
upgrade to bubblegum plus.
Okay.
Upgrade to bubblegum plus easily for just as a bubblegum member. Off almost everything. Clickable checkbox not checked. I accept the I accept button upgrade.
Okay, so it's similar to the previous section.
Graphic mobile screenshot of the app.
Right. Did announce the image again.
Heading level 2 enjoy bubblegum plus on the app.
So I think like here again, like maybe you would first talk about the heading, kind of like, since the headings are the things that separate kind of sections on the pages. That's where I would put the heading above the image instead of the opposite. And actually maybe that image, like,
Graphic mobile screenshot of the app.
so again, like, it says that it's a graphic of the mobile screenshot of the app, but what kind of information does it give to the user? Like, is it useful, or is it more of a decorative nature here? And if it's decorative, then maybe
It should describe the content of the image,
right.
right?
But again, like, is that image like in general, like is it important for the user to know that there is a graphic of the image here, like for the screen reader user, or potentially, like I think in that case, like you could omit the alt tag, in which case the screen reader would not announce the image, or maybe make it a background image since it's like purely decorative.
That's a good point.
Heading level 2. Enjoy Bubblegum Plus on the app. Download the app and never forget your Bubblegum list with 3 items. Bullet, scan your card at checkout.
Okay.
Bullet, check your points balance. Bullet, track orders. Out of list link graphic, download on the App Store.
So here, those images have alt tags, and I think that's where that was important. Like, so as the opposite to the previous example, like it's the active link that has the image in it, and since we want to provide some text alternative, that's why the alt text is useful.
Link graphic, get it on Google Play.
So now I know, like, it's a link that would hopefully take me to the Google Play.
Heading level 2. FAQ.
Okay, so now we're on the FAQ section.
Clickable. Heading level 3. How are Bubblegum points redeemed?
And it seems that like I'm on a clickable heading, so let me try and press enter. And it did actually expand the section, but it doesn't really, like I can collapse it as well, but it doesn't really announce that, you know, it's expanded or collapsed, so I don't really know what's happening on the screen without looking at it. So let's move next.
Bubblegum points may be redeemed. Blank. Bubblegum points.
And right now it's reading some text that is off screen. That's probably not the best practice. Like again, like similar to that problem with the links being accessible, kind of like, and removing the focus of off screen. Like now the text that is not directly on screen is accessible. I don't know like how much people, like how much screen reader users would care, but I would say like if that section is collapsed, then content should not be accessible. Just so that like there might be a lot of content that the person would have to go through, and like that's not very useful.
Yeah, it should allow them to go dig deeper into the section.
Yes.
So it should announce the different headings for the accordion, and then it should ask them to expand that further if they want to.
Yes, I agree. And announce when you expand it.
Reward value 2,5, $25.
Okay, so it just like jumps through, goes through all of the kind of internals of the FAQ section. So we'll just keep FAQ and like we'll go to the next section, which is still have questions, and I'm going to use a shortcut here. I'm going to press H to jump to that section.
Clickable. Can I join Bubblegum Plus if I'm a Bubblegum Rewards member?
So it actually goes
Heading
through
level
those
3.
headers for the FAQ.
Clickable. Where can I still have questions?
So now we're on that
Heading level 3.
still have questions section.
Call us 5 days a week from 5 a.m. to midnight, 123 123 1234, or visit our link help center.
Okay.
One valid at bubblegum.com.
And then
See link Bubblegum Rewards for program details.
we jumped to the legal section, but it didn't really announce it that way. Like I would expect a heading to exist on that page, so that like it would describe that this is a legal section, but that was a miss.
Yeah.
And another one,
Even if it's visually not visible, but it should, like I guess some headings should be there, even if the design of the page dictate that it shouldn't be there.
yes,
It can be there, but invisible.
right. So like you would use some technique to kind of like put the heading into your markup, like above the section, but then like just apply some style to take it off screen, still making it accessible to the screen reader. Yeah. Right. And another issue that I notice here that...
Tu lorem ipsum do lower sit amit.
So like it just reads the text, and like it actually tells you that's a superscript 2, then, you know, like some kind of note about it. But there is no way for me to kind of go between those footnotes, like those footnote links. So there is no linkage between those. And for, you know, like if you have those superscripts all over your page, then it might be like really hard for the user to remember kind of the order in which they were going and like what they were referring to. So as a result, they might decide, you know, like it's just way too complicated, those legal terms that you have for the bubblegum membership. So I'm going to leave you and go to your competitor.
Exit and
And let me show you some examples of the footnotes. Side points, CSS footnotes. So that's one of the example. On this page, they're talking about a technique that would allow you to kind of make footnotes accessible. And what's nice about it, I should probably jump to the demo if you have one. Here, so you can go to results. And I think I can change the view to full page. So what's possible here, I can use keyboard to jump between those footnotes. So that's another thing that is related to the keyboard accessibility that we didn't see on that demo page. That was missing kind of keyboard accessibility for the footnotes. And here I can like quickly kind of jump between sections and go back to where I was. And all of that is implemented through CSS. So what's cool about it that like there is no hard coding of those, like, you know, 1, 2, and 3 at all. Like those are being generated through CSS counters, those numbers over here. And let's try it out like with a screen reader. How would it sound with a screen reader if we were to use it here on that page?
accessible footnotes with CSS Brave.
Okay, let's jump to the link.
K. X.
Oh,
K.
shortcuts are not working.
Accessible footnotes with CSS document. CodePen accessible footnotes with CS.
Okay, so let's jump to the second one.
CSS2 visited link footnotes.
So it was very nice in like the way how it announced that it's a CSS footnotes. Let's try the next one.
Counters 3 visited link footnotes.
So it announces both the text as well as like the kind of the number of the footnotes, and it told us that that's a link. So if I click on it,
List with 3 items 3. CSS counters are, in essence, very...
Wow.
and it started reading, like, you know, announcing that section right away.
Back to content visited link.
And right after I can go back to where I was.
Counters 3 visited link footnotes. Exit and...
So very powerful.
Can we see the markup for this?
Yes. The only gotcha here, so the markup is actually fairly simple. So you just like drop some text into a link, and like you kind of like create an anchor over there, and like you can have the label. That is probably...
And that's an ID.
Yes. So that label is probably... So ID, like over here, that anchor is linking to those list elements over here. And footnote label, so I wonder what that is. Described by footnote label. Oh, I see. So it's just described by this one. Yes.
Okay.
and then kind of like links back to the anchor.
Nice.
Right. The only downside with that CSS approach is that if you would want to have two anchors on the same page, say like footnotes here, like with that anchor one pointing to this one, and you would want to have another anchor, like say like over here, that also points to one, then you wouldn't be able to do that with this approach, because like it's based on the anchors, and anchors are tied to IDs, and you can only have one element with one ID, like technically on the page. So
I see.
So that's kind of the gotcha. There are some other examples, like where you would use JavaScript for like kind of tracking which footnotes belong to what, that are a bit more involved. Okay, so I think we went through screen reader accessibility for the desktop, and just like a quick note, so far we didn't look at mobile at all, but this page is responsive. So if I were to activate the responsive mode, Galaxy S5, let's try to make it bigger, 75%. So here like we have a mobile layout. The page generally looks okay, like in mobile the images are responsive. So like how would you test the mobile screen layout with the screen reader? So option A is you would test on your phone, like, which is probably not a bad thing, like because that's where most of the users would test the mobile layouts. However, it's not true for all of the users. Something that VCAG 2.0 prescribes is that page should be accessible and should also not have the kind of the horizontal scroll bar, even when it's zoomed to 200%. So when you zoom the pages with media queries, they naturally go into the mobile layout. And here, like, it's also possible that a desktop user who has the keyboard, mouse, and everything could actually, like, someone who is maybe have like moderate vision loss, they would want to enlarge the text to make it like very big, so that they can go through the experience.
What's that thing that you clicked on?
So that's the extension that can simulate some color blindness, but it also can help you to emulate moderate vision loss or severe blindness.
Oh,
and like
cool.
right
Never
now
seen it.
right now I applied moderate vision loss. So with that we can see that we can kind of like imagine that someone with that condition might want to enlarge the page, and they might kind of potentially like even use the screen reader to read out the text. So the same concepts that we were talking about, the keyboard accessibility, like it applies to mobile layout as well. So like right now I'm jumping from section to section like with the keyboard, and I'm on desktop, even though like I'm using the mobile layout. So that's where, you know, like when you think of responsive, you shouldn't really think that's tied to the device. You should kind of consider that it might be used on the desktop as well. And same for the screen reader. So like you could use even the desktop screen reader to kind of like go over the pages and, you know, like try to access various sections. So there are websites that
to the bubblegum
that hide
exit
some of the features on the mobile, like potentially, you know, like if you would have those FAQs and there is like a section that kind of the page that where it would link to, so like instead of displaying all of the text like under here, you might want to link it to another page, but that might be not the best experience for the users, because they saw that there is something that is accessible on the desktop and they wanted to enlarge the page slightly, and then they would see that section disappears. So probably want to avoid those inconsistencies between mobile and desktop. want to kind of generalize the approach.
Right.
Oh.
Because that's a very common practice,
Mm-hmm.
right? And maybe it's not the best practice to have.
Right.
Mobile is usually, some features would be missing
Yes.
because the user's, context is different.
Correct.
And they may want to do other things. Yeah, that's good to know.
Yeah, like I know that there were some kind of sections that I've built in the past where I was always kind of thinking, okay, so on desktop people can use mouse and keyboard, so that makes sense, but then on mobiles they would probably be like tapping on the screen, so maybe I want to like handle that differently. And that's basically, it was like a little bit of my ignorance that I didn't know that actually per VCAG 2.0 people who might zoom in the page, and like now it actually makes perfect sense to me, but it's definitely a possibility for someone to look at mobile layout on their desktops. Yeah. And
Okay.
As for results, like say like differences between testing the mobile layout with the desktop screen reader, there are almost no differences. They would behave pretty much the same way between the screen reader on your mobile and the screen reader on your desktop. Like they would kind of like go through the same sections, like they would kind of be exposed pretty much the same way to both screen readers.
So is it a good option to, like, let's say if you want to rearrange things visually between mobile and desktop and use like Flexbox ordering or something?
Right.
The markup will be the same, therefore the screen reader will read the same. But then if somebody zooms in like what you've just shown, they still will have a different experience.
Yes. That's a good point.
So it doesn't even sound like that's a good approach, using Flexbox to rearrange things.
I agree. Like unless you can somehow make it so that like when you're going from section to section, it actually goes in the order that makes sense visually. So like if you're changing like in one layout you're making like one arrangement, and in another layout you're making another arrangement, that's where you would have to make sure that the kind of focus order still makes sense, that like it kind of like visually is natural, it doesn't jump from one section to another, and like you would have to do some extra there. It's not just CSS at that point. I think you would have to use some JavaScript in order, like to kind of relink how the flow should be.
Right. Like you force a specific tab order kind of thing. Yeah.
Yep.
It's more complicated.
So maybe like something else that I can show with the screen reader is the ability for users.
Welcome break.
Like there is a option for users to jump between sections. So if you press insert F7, then
welcome elements list dialog, tree view, register account.
Bring that elements list, which allows you to kind of navigate the page using links or headings or form fields, buttons, and landmarks. And for a user, so like it's a general recommendation for the link text to be kind of expressive enough so that like based on the link text you would know like where you would be taken after it if you click on that link. So for example,
join free 2 of 13 level 0.
If we go to that join free link, where would it take me as a user? Like if I'm not too familiar with that page, I wouldn't really know. But if we would say something like join free bubblegum rewards, then that would make a lot more sense.
Right.
And so some other examples might be like potentially on news websites or like any blog posts where you see like learn more button. So if that's just a link that says learn more, and imagine like if you have 10 of those repeating on the same page, then like what are you going to learn more about? Like you would have to
Right.
go to that link, and then from that link maybe find the heading that is closest to it, and then only from there you would understand where you would go. So the better strategy would be to link the heading itself instead of like linking that learn more.
I'll make the heading clickable and links, or you can add an area label, I guess, if you really want to, for that link.
Right. Yeah.
So you would have a different, like the link name would be learn more, but the area label would be more descriptive.
Wonder, so again, like probably something that you said before, something that is worth testing. So like if you think that might work out, and then like check out like with that elements list, just how is it going to work?
That's good. This is really useful, especially for navigating the form fields. I vaguely remember using this feature a long time ago. And this will help you kind of see your outline of the page, right? If you go to headings,
type.
Yeah.
So here we can see.
So this is to make sure your markup is structured properly.
Right. And we can see that like the main one is welcome header, that makes sense. Then sign up for like kind of register. Okay, sure. So that makes sense. Which program is right for you makes sense. But then 0 and 5 don't make sense at all. Then there are other headings. FAQ makes sense. But then below that, let's take a look.
Tree view. Lorem ipsum do lower. Move to.
So if we move to this heading, I don't remember seeing it.
The bubblegum rewards experience you love just got better.
So actually what happens here,
Lorem ipsum do lower sit.
That those 4 kind of paragraphs of text over here are actually marked with the heading as H2. Also kind of like a problematic area that needs to be fixed, because it doesn't make sense, like that's not a heading, but somehow probably because of the style.
Should be a footer, if anything.
Right. Okay. Right. So what else do we have here?
There's also the lack of regions, I guess.
Right. Let's
like header, main content, or like main, and then footer. I think those are important.
Lorem ipsum.
Yep. Some reason.
Episode.
Area landmarks.
Welcome, Brave.
That's what they're called, I believe.
Yes.
Elements list dialog. Type.
Landmarks.
Grouping. Elements list.
So here there is only that main landmark, but probably should have header and footer, maybe navigation for some pieces.
True.
Cancel.
Right, so let's
exit.
Look at something else. So like we saw that over here we have a table-like markup, but we didn't really hear, like when you focus on that section, like we didn't really hear that being announced as kind of the item that belongs to earn or bubblegum rewards. So I think, and if we look at the mobile, kind of like how it looks on mobile, the table is structured a bit differently. So I think that's where potentially flexboxes or something like that was used. And I mean, visually it makes sense, but kind of like when screen reader goes to that section, it doesn't make too much sense. So potentially you could use area tags for table markup to define the relations between kind of table cells and table rows, like to the headings, so that screen reader would go through those sections and read them properly. Think on MDN area table row. So if we look at this documentation, it shows the example of how to do it properly, how to apply markup and some area attributes in order to kind of help to define markup that doesn't use the table markup to still appear as a table for the screen readers.
Right.
Okay, so the other issue that we have here, so this text over here, the text of dash, like potentially it would be beneficial to kind of like maybe put the off-screen text, that's something that says not applicable or something like that instead of the dash, so that like it's very clear to the user that you don't really get savings for the rewards compared to the Bubblegum Plus. And another thing that we saw in the desktop layout, that this first cell is empty, and potentially here you would put something like a type of earnings or type of savings or benefit, so that like it's very clear for the user that like when they land on save, then it announces it as, you know, benefit save, and then you go to the next cell. It's like, you know, get 5 points on every $1 for Bubblegum rewards. So that's another item. And I guess two more. So for the FAQs, so over here, in order to make those sections accessible, there is actually kind of an HTML element that can help you make it accessible, that is called details. Okay, so that's how it looks. And if we look at it, so what's nice about the details element is that it allows you to kind of focus on the description very quickly. So like you don't really, like out of the box, that's something that is supported in browsers, that you can like just focus on that section without any need for JavaScript. And you can also expand and collapse this section with the keyboard. So that would potentially address that issue with FAQ section not being accessible through the keyboard. And you can add a summary section inside. So I think, like, I believe if we remove the summary section, I wonder if we can render it. So like without summary section, it potentially, I don't actually even know. So summary is allowing you to kind of announce what the content of that section is. So that's what you would use it for. And with the screen reader, if we try to use, say, like NVDA here.
HTML property page. Edit.
Okay. So I actually have a focus trap here. Like I'm trying to move the focus to the next element, but I can't because it kind of got into the code.
The common use of HTML less defined details button collapsed.
Finally focused on it. And let's try to expand it.
Expanded, collapsed, expanded, collapsed.
So the screen reader, like NVDA, has a good support for, you know, like announcing that section is expanded or collapsed.
Expanded, collapsed.
Out of the box. The only gotcha that I saw on the government website
Exit.
was this approach. If you put heading inside, which in some scenarios you might want to, like potentially would want to kind of like quickly allow a user to jump to that section using headings. If you put heading right inside the summary and try to kind of do that expanding, collapsing thing, then NVD doesn't really tell you that section got expanded. So that was a little bug that I found. And the last one, the very last issue. So all of that content over here looks like it's legal notes, right? But we also know that this section over here is using markup for kind of like H2. And the reality is that legal notes is only this section. See how like only that part is being marked with the superscripts, but the rest is just some page summary. So what I would do in that case is I would wrap this kind of whole section into the section element, the HTML5 section element, and give it that heading that says page summary. And potentially, if we don't want to show it visually, then use that CSS to kind of put it off screen. And same for this section, like the legal section, also I would wrap into the section tag, add an H2 or whatever is the proper one, and kind of put it off screen.
Sounds good.
Okay, so we are done with this part. Let's quickly go through the rest. So Chrome accessibility audit. So worth mentioning, probably a lot of people already aware of it, but under audits, you can choose to...
Let's pause for a second.
So we decided to break down this episode into 2 or 3 pieces because that was already like a large episode, like which involved the manual audit with the keyboard and the screen reader, and we found a lot of issues, but in order to go through the kind of extensions and the rest of the material, it would take a lot of time. So right now that makes a perfect sense to pause here and move on to the speed round. And if you want to kind of learn more about accessibility and like want to kind of learn more about what the automated tools are going to give you, then please subscribe, and in 2 weeks you will get another episode that talks about accessibility.
Yeah, I agree. Like, it's a very hot topic right now, accessibility, and it's a very broad topic. And Sergey, like, you've done a really good job, but you've covered maybe like a small portion of what needs to be covered. And I know that you have a lot more knowledge. And yeah, we decided instead of cramming it all in, we'll just keep breaking it up.
Yep.
So let us know if you're interested. We can, delve even deeper than that and do like a series on accessibility.
All right, cool. So let's move on to the speed round.
Sounds good.
Okay. So what do we have today? So the first one is Photopea, and basically that's like an online editor, like that is very similar to Photoshop. So I found it very helpful. Like you can probably edit, PDF documents, and it have all of the, PSD documents, and it has like all of the tools that you would generally have in the Photoshop, but it is free. And why I decided to speak about it, because as I was kind of like creating this page and transforming some elements, I really found that tool like was a big time saving for me. Like I didn't have to buy the very expensive product, and I was able to like quickly make the changes that I needed.
Great.
Cool. Next.
So Yarn 2. So this was released recently. Made a big buzz in the Node community, front-end community as well. So it comes with pretty interesting features. The biggest one is Yarn plug and play. Sorry, my keyboard is pretty loud. There's a whole discussion going on. It drastically changes how we manage the dependencies. Instead of putting them in a node modules folder, it employs a completely different approach. And then I guess Yarn 1 is now classic Yarn. So by default, if you upgrade to Yarn 2, you will get the plug and play instead of node modules. And there were some issues with some major projects not being able to support the new plug and play.
Which projects? Like, what are the examples?
I think TypeScript. Oh no, React Native and Flow.
Okay.
Two projects that were somehow dependent on node modules structure.
So what's the difference?
So it created.
Yeah. Sorry, like with plug and play, what is the difference? Like, what is it doing differently from what Yarn 1 was doing?
Yeah, so in the plug and play, I'm just looking at my projects here. Yeah, so in plug and play, you don't have the node modules project folder structure anymore. You just have like a Yarn cache, and it has the compressed dependency. So like Lodash would be lodash.zip, and there's a plug and play JavaScript file that will load all your dependencies.
Okay, so it's just like a different way of loading the dependencies. Like before it was doing it based on the node module structure, and now it's reading those archive files, like from some config file.
Yes. That's as far as my knowledge goes. It's but it did create some discussion and some fights on Twitter. NPM is doing a certain way. Yarn 2 is switching to plug and play by default, which was a bit contentious. But then the authors of Yarn 2 were saying, if we don't enable plug and play by default, then no one would ever turn it on, and the node community is not gonna move past the node modules problem. There's many articles that I saw on problems with node modules.
I see. Like I remember there is another, like a third less known but also very cool package manager called PNPM, Performant NPM, and the whole idea is based around symlinks, so that like it would create symlinks references instead of like real folders. So say like you have 10 projects and all of them are using Lodash, that Lodash would only be installed on your computer once, like in some folder, and then from there it would be symlinked to the rest of the projects. So like this way it's kind of like installing everything much faster. I guess that's a similar thing that Yarn tried to address. Just try a different approach.
Yeah, I think it's trying to address the same problem. I'm trying to see the problems with node module. I did see some good articles before. This is probably a good issue to look at. We'll link to it in a note show. But Yarn 2 created a buzz. I think it's trying to improve or fix that problem. To me, it's something to follow, because that's what innovation. That's what happens usually. It creates a bit of a backlash, and it's usually a good thing.
I see. Cool. So let's go to the next one. So learning pyramid. So that's something that I saw recently, a reference to it. It's not the best image for sure, but maybe let's try to find one on Wikipedia. Let's see, open image up. Here, so I just changed the background, and basically that's kind of like almost a way to describe how people learn and how much information is retained after, say, like 24 hours. So like if you read, then you will remember 10% of what you read. If you hear, then you would remember 20% of what you hear, and 30% of what you see, 50% of what you see and hear, etc., etc. So what I'm thinking right now, that like for our audience, like they might find that they are learning better by watching our videos, because they are hearing, seeing all of that, and potentially even like trying to apply some of that knowledge. So they would be like somewhere between, say, like 30 and 50% of the information that would be retained like in 24 hours after kind of like this talk, that this video that they're going to watch. But for us, it's more beneficial, because we are also kind of like practicing of kind of applying the knowledge and trying to share it like with the rest of the audience. So like when you're trying to kind of like express it, then it's somewhere between 70 to 90% of the information that will be retained, and I find that like very kind of interesting. Like that's something that I noticed that like in some meetings I want to write down things that were on the slides in the presentations, because this way I kind of like remember the context, like not only that I can see it on one page and refer to it later, I also find that like this way I'm a lot more involved into the kind of like meetings, and it was nice to see that like there is kind of like some study that was done around it. So if you want to learn more about learning pyramid, then like there is kind of a Wikipedia page that talks about this approach.
Sweet.
Right.
NPX. So lots of people are familiar with it, just in case some are not. Basically, it's a way to execute commands from your node modules binary folder. So that way, for example, if you want to use a CLI, you don't have to install it globally. You can just use NPX, and NPX will look for the binary in your local node modules. If it doesn't find it, then it will look for the global. And if it doesn't find it, then it will actually install it and run the command. Very useful for like working on an Angular project, for example. You have your CLI, and it's better to just have it as a local package. That way you upgrade it alongside all the other dependencies. So I use NPX all the time on Windows. On Mac, it's a bit different because you can execute the binary directly from shell.
Cool.
Yeah.
But I mean, on Windows you can still do that. It's just, like you would have to write a longer command in order to do it.
Right.
And I think maybe like if that's a package, like guess it depends on like how, like, do you want to install that package somewhere? Like, like say like if it's like a dependency for the project, then normally I guess you would install it as part of the dependencies, dev dependencies, and then just in script tags you can refer to the binary, so it would execute, like it would kind of npm would know how to find, like how to link that binary to the kind of packages folder. But I guess npx is useful like when you want to run a command without installing the package completely. I'm just like trying to understand the use case.
Yeah, if you don't want to install it and run the binary, then npx is your tool for that.
Mm-hmm. Is there something like, so npx is an npm tool, right? Is there something like that from Yarn as well, or not really?
I'm not sure. It may work with Yarn.
I mean, like it would definitely work with any package that is like a binary package. I'm just thinking like if Yarn team also came up with their own version of it.
It's possible.
Anyway, I think that's not too important. Just wondering. I can do my own research later.
Yeah, sounds good.
Cool. So let's move on. So next one is calculator converter. So every time when I need to do, like kind of like maybe see like how much would it cost, like say like $100 a month in USD to Canadian, like what's the current rate, or 100 might be an easy number, like if you know the rate, but like something more complex than that. Or sometimes I'm kind of working with volume, so imagine like that you need to estimate something inside the cloud infrastructure. And then like very often you would kind of go to something like Azure calculator, and don't spell it correctly, but there is that pricing calculator that would allow you to choose the service, and then based on like number of transactions, then you're going to find out like how much money is going to cost you. So and when you're trying to figure out the pricing, then I found out that very often I'm kind of like trying to go to Google to do that conversion, like from say like kilobytes to bytes, or kibibytes to terabytes, tabybytes, and what I found like that kind of like every time I go to Google, but maybe there is like a different way for me to search for that information, like for that conversion. So Windows have a calculator application that like in addition to standard math calculations, you can choose like to maybe convert volume, like, or like data volume, or currency, or perhaps like even time. So some places where I find that useful, so say like you want to kind of, that on Azure they might might charge you for traffic manager, like some tool that charges based on bandwidth, and they charge in gigabytes, sorry. So gigabytes. So if we use that, and like say like we have images in gigabytes, so like we have 100 gigabytes images, and like times 400, so say like you have images that are 100 kilobytes each, and you have maybe like 14, some random number here, so like say like that's how many gigabytes you would have. So like that's per image, and that would be the number of images. So you take that total number and you want to know like how much you would be charged. So we can just paste that number here, and that results in 173 gigabytes, which is equal to, like 1.7 TB or 111 terabytes. And like if you want to kind of like see it in relation, then that's like 30 DVDs. So that's pretty cool. And for time, so like I find that very often you need to convert, say, like seconds to sometimes days or weeks. Like if you look at some cache headers in browsers, so like for how long this page was cached, and then like you enter some number of seconds, and eventually you see, oh, like that's actually 9 weeks. So that's pretty cool.
Pretty good.
Right, and we have the last one.
Yeah, last one is just a link that was trending on Hacker News. This digital agency, basically I was able to drive organic growth. Went from 0 to 200,000.
Wow.
And yeah, the client was Telefy.
Oops, my camera
So just
died.
a pretty good use case. I guess we've been on for too long, Sergey.
I know.
Your phone gave up. Yeah, so this...
So like
I found it to be an interesting case study.
And what were the like main key points there?
Just the keywords selection, some search, some content optimization, some performance. It's a long read, but I thought I'd share the link.
And marketing, like a lot of marketing, I assume?
Yes, it's a marketing agency. So, but it's great that they're sharing what they did, so that you can do the same to your own website without having to spend so much money.
Right. Awesome. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I guess this concludes our episode.
Yes.
Episode 4.
Yep. Right, so
thank you so much, Sergey.
Thank you, Marwan. And thank you for everyone, like all of our watchers and listeners. And yes,
indeed.
Please join us next week for the next episode. Subscribe and share.
Subscribe.
Comment.
Give us your feedback. We'll delve deeper into accessibility in the next upcoming episodes. And we will see you soon.
All right. Bye.
Bye.